20 years ago, after finding success with the Rayman franchise, a couple of developers left Ubisoft Montpellier to form their new studio and make a game set in the Stone Age, sporting a funny looking fella and some genuinely fun platforming segments and action. Unfortunately, the game would be the first original IP this developer would make before things went south, and it's all because of Microsoft. This is the history of Tork Prehistoric Punk. In August 2000, 8 former Ubisoft developers left the company to launch a new venture initially known as Yeti Interactive. The studio began recruiting talent from across France, including developers who had worked on Nightmare Creatures and possibly its planned third installment, which would be cancelled in the months that followed. From the outset, Yeti Interactive aimed high. In late 2001, they pitched their first game, codenamed Picoulat, to Microsoft as a 3D platformer conceived as a AAA title. During its prototyping phase, Microsoft still lacked an official mascot. This was before Master Chief took the industry by storm. Yeti Interactive hoped Picoulat could become the face of the brand. Tork's first name was actually Picoulat, Nicolas Riviére said. The game was developed with the thought that it would become a big AAA title for the Xbox and maybe even be the mascot of the console. At the time, Xbox was striking deals left and right with developers eager to challenge the juggernauts of the genre. Franchises like Crash Bandicoot, Super Mario, and Jak and Daxter. It hardly mattered who you were. If you had a compelling pitch, Microsoft was willing to accept it. Many would argue this was the golden period for 3D platformers. Sony was preparing to launch Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper. Nintendo continued to dominate with Super Mario, and Microsoft was assembling its own arsenal in response. Psychonauts, Voodoo Vents, and Blinks. Picoulat 2 was stepping into the arena. Around 2001, Picoulat was secretly in development at Yeti Interactive. Once production shifted into full gear, the studio was renamed Tiwak. The game was being made in secret, Nicolas shared. Everything was prepared for a big announcement during E3 2002. Microsoft had high hopes for Tiwak, placing the team among the 10 developers selected to join the core division of Microsoft Studios. We were the main title for the game division of Microsoft. They were hoping a lot from the IP, speaking of a cartoon, of marketing crossover to get the character everywhere, and of a release in Japan, the #1 market where all the best ages were coming from. Soon enough, Picoulat was unveiled at E3 2002 under a new name, Tork. What should have been a defining moment for both the game and the studio instead turned into a disappointment. Tork was buried beneath a wave of competing titles flooding the market at the time. Even first-party projects like Voodoo Vents and Blinks drew more attention, leaving Tork with little more than weak press coverage and a handful of screenshots. According to what Nicolas Riviére later shared on his blog, Microsoft made several mistakes during the reveal. At that stage of development, the game's engine was far from ready. It lacked music, and both the visuals and frame rate were subpar. The graphics and sound still needed some tweaking, yet Microsoft chose to present Tork to the public in that state. It was beautiful and full of promise, but it was too early to be presented to the public and the press. Microsoft at the same time was facing their own problems after the release of the console. But as March 2003 loomed on the horizon, it became clear the studio would need even more time. Instead, unexpected news arrived. Microsoft decided to cancel Tork along with several other internally developed projects. According to Nicolas, the company had chosen to focus on successful projects rather than risk releasing titles that would be buried in the sands. From day one, lots of games were then stopped. They would keep only potential million sellers. Another really important change too was that Microsoft bought Rare Studios for a really high price. Problems began piling up for Tiwak. What was meant to be a breakthrough opportunity for a startup studio quickly turned into a nightmare. Leadership faced the painful decision of laying off staff, and with finances rapidly shrinking, the company had little room to maneuver. We had 6 months, maybe 9, to find a new project or someone that would like to finish Tork, Nicolas reveals. During this time, we were still working on it while also sometimes working on fast playable demos for some potential other contracts and projects. 2003 marked a bleak chapter for Tiwak. Bankruptcy loomed, and the walls seemed to close in. Tiwak continued pitching Tork to publishers who initially showed interest, including Sega and Capcom, but most hesitated once they realized the game had been exclusively built for Xbox. At one point, the studio even considered downgrading its engine in hopes of porting the game to PlayStation 2. Rejection followed rejection until Codemasters stepped in and agreed to publish Tork, signing a deal for December 2003 release. After months of uncertainty, it finally felt like a lifeline. That relief didn't last. When grabbed by the ghoulies, underperformed both commercially and critically. Codemasters grew wary of Xbox exclusives and ultimately backed away from publishing Tork. The door had opened only to slam shut again, sending Tiwak back to square one. We were now a few weeks from closing, probably in January. Tork was ready to be gold but was without a publisher. We were all tired, and this was the end. Things continued this way until early 2004. On January 12, Ubisoft stepped in and acquired Tiwak along with Tork from Microsoft for a cheap sum. For the first time in months, the team could finally breathe. Ubisoft not only rescued Tork from cancellation but also tasked another studio, Realism, to develop a Game Boy Advance port, reportedly scheduled for 2005. Following the acquisition, the game adopted a new and final name, Tork Prehistoric Punk. Yet while Ubisoft had rescued the project, the marketing efforts were very poor. The press barely mentioned it. No print ads were made for it, not even a single guidebook, and Ubisoft made little effort to let the world know that the game existed. Tork drifted in obscurity until its quiet release on January 12, 2005, very late into the Xbox lifecycle. To make matters worse, Ubisoft released the game exclusively in North America, severely limiting its target audience. In the end, Tork Prehistoric Punk sold roughly 3,000 copies. The planned GBA port was quietly cancelled before the console version was released. After Tork, Tiwak never returned to leading its own original project. Instead, the studio was folded into Ubisoft's internal structure, assisting on titles such as Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Beowulf, and Rabbids, until it was fully absorbed in 2012. Tork began as an ambitious project, a would-be AAA contender meant to stand alongside the giants of the genre. Instead, it was quietly trampled under the genre's mammoths, disappearing almost as soon as it arrived. And that's perhaps the greatest shame of it all. Beneath the missteps and missed opportunities was a genuinely fun game, one that, under different circumstances, might have stood a fighting chance.